Όσον αφορά το ελληνικό ζήτημα, η Αθήνα έχει δηλώσει ότι θα επιστρέψει στις αγορές στο δεύτερο μισό του 2014. Σύμφωνα με την εμπειρία σας, βλέπετε αυτό να είναι εφικτό?
It really depends on the size of the bond issue. I think there will be some demand. Obviously, Greek banks will show some willingness to purchase this Greek government debt, especially after their recapitalisation. The real test will there be foreign demand? We have seen some inflows of money into the Greek stock market and into the existing or the remaining Greek bond market. So there is some hope there, but I think it would have to be a fairly small issue. And, the demand remains from very specific hedge funds and other investment funds looking for potentially high-yielding investments. So, it will be very difficult for them to get back onto the bond markets in a sustained way, but that's not to say a one-off or an occasional bond issue is out of the question.
Πώς εξηγείται αυτό το ενδιαφέρον των hedge funds για την Ελλάδα?
Well, I think it makes sense, to be honest. If you look at the returns that have been on offer, it's all about, I guess, estimating when the issue has bottomed out in Greece and when the turnaround is, and looking at the returns that have been there on Greek bonds and in the stock market over the past year or 6 months, there does seem to have been some logic to their investment. Obviously, it remains high risk because the ultimate outcome is tied very closely with the sovereign and what happens in the Eurozone crisis, but clearly there are always going to be these sorts of hedge funds willing to take on that risk. I mean, we've seen it in other cases such as Argentina and in many emerging markets over the past decade. So it's not entirely unsurprising, but it's not a reliant source of funding over the long term.
And lastly, on the Greek debt issue, and especially in regards to its viability. Και τέλος, στο θέμα του ελληνικού χρέους και ειδικά όσον αφορά τη βιωσιμότητά του, Διεθνές Νομισματικό Ταμείο και Ευρώπη έχουν διαφορετικές προσεγγίσεις. Το Ταμείο προτείνει ένα είδος κουρέματος, ενώ οι Ευρωπαίοι το απορρίπτουν. Πρώτα απ' όλα, γιατί δεν υπάρχει μια κοινή γραμμή? Και κατά δεύτερον, ποια συμβιβαστική λύση μπορεί να προωθηθεί? Could be given regarding the Greek debt's viability?
Well, I think the IMF is and has always been traditionally more in favour of debt restructuring. It's been part of its normal operation in emerging markets, and I think actually the original Greek bailouts and the other Eurozone bailouts were unusual in that they didn't involve some form of debt relief. And I think the pressure within the IMF has been building from the other countries outside of Europe that are part of the IMF to shift the burden away from bailout, which they fund, towards European countries taking more of the burden. And I think there's also an issue of the debt sustainability analysis on which the IMF grounds a lot of its programs is simply now looking very difficult to justify. And I think it's increasingly showing the need for debt relief. On the other hand, you have the EU and the Eurozone, where these countries have so much money invested in Greece now through the bailout loans that they're hesitant to take any losses. This is particularly true of Germany, where any losses on these loans to Greece would not only be politically and economically difficult, it would be legally problematic and would create problems in the German Constitutional Court. And that would create larger problems for the Eurozone and its sustainability as a whole. So there are clear lines and reasons for the differences, but I personally believe the IMF is on the right line here.